The wedding invitation trembled in Amara's hands as she stood in the marble foyer of her Lagos home, the golden sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows doing nothing to warm the ice that had suddenly filled her veins. The elegant calligraphy seemed to mock her. Kwame Asante and Zara Okafor request your presence at their wedding ceremony. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. Zara. Her best friend since university. The woman who had cried on Amara's shoulder just 6 months ago when Amara's marriage to Kwame had fallen apart. The same Zara who had promised to help Amara through the divorce proceedings, who had sworn that men like Kwame didn't deserve women like them. The invitation slipped from her fingers, floating to the polished floor like a death sentence. Amara's phone buzzed incessantly on the marble console table, probably more friends calling to ask if she'd seen the news, if she'd known, if she was okay. The society pages of Lagos had been buzzing all morning with photos of the happy couple at their traditional engagement ceremony, Kwame resplendent in white agbada, Zara glowing in gold and green oak. Amara Okonkwo had built her life around being the perfect wife, the ideal mother, the successful businesswoman who managed to balance family and career with enviable grace. At 35, she owned 3 high-end boutiques across Victoria Island, Ikoyi, and Lekki, catering to Lagos's elite women. Her 2 children, 12-year-old Kemi and 8-year-old Tond, were her pride and joy. And until 8 months ago, she had thought her 10-year marriage to Kwame was solid, built on love, trust, and shared dreams. The domestic betrayal had started with small things: late nights at the office, phone calls he'd take in private, a new cologne that made her stomach turn. When she'd confronted him about the emotional manipulation, the way he'd grown cold and distant, Kwame had turned it back on her. He'd accused her of being too controlling, too focused on her business, too independent for a traditional marriage. The gaslighting had been subtle but effective, making her question her own instincts even as the evidence mounted. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Kwame's family, prominent in across business circles, had money and influence that stretched across West Africa. They'd painted Amara as the career-obsessed wife who had neglected her husband and family. The public disgrace had been calculated and devastating: whispers at social gatherings, pitying looks at the children's school, business associates suddenly becoming unavailable. But through it all, Zara had been there. Zara, with her warm smile and listening ear, her designer handbags and perfect nails, her own successful event planning business that catered to Lagos's social elite. She'd been the one to help Amara find the strength to fight for full custody of the children. She'd been the one to encourage Amara to focus on expanding her business empire. She'd been the one to promise that betrayal like Kwame's would never touch their friendship. Now, staring at the wedding invitation, Amara realized she'd been living in a fool's paradise. The cheating spouse angle was bad enough, but this was something far more sinister. This wasn't just infidelity in marriage, this was a calculated takedown orchestrated by the 2 people she trusted most in the world. Her phone rang, piercing the silence. Kemi's number flashed on the screen. Her daughter's voice was small when Amara answered, barely above a whisper. "Mama, the kids at school are saying Daddy is getting married again. They are saying it's to Auntie Zara." "That's not true, right? Auntie Zara is your friend." Amara closed her eyes, her free hand gripping the edge of the console table until her knuckles went white. The co-parenting conflict she tried so hard to shield her children from was about to explode into something much worse. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest? "Mama, are you there?" "I'm here, my love," Amara managed, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Come straight home after school today. We need to talk." After she hung up, Amara picked up the invitation from the floor, studying it with new eyes. The date was set for 3 weeks from now, a lavish ceremony at the Eco Hotel, followed by a reception that would be the talk of Lagos society. The guest list would include everyone who mattered in their social circle, everyone who had watched Amara's marriage crumble and would now witness her ultimate humiliation. But as she stood there in her beautiful home, surrounded by the life she'd built with her own hands, Amara felt something shift inside her. The initial shock was crystallizing into something harder, more dangerous. She'd survived the divorce, rebuilt her reputation, and created a thriving business empire. She wasn't the same woman who had begged Kwame to go to counseling, who had blamed herself for his coldness. This wasn't just about a cheating spouse anymore. This was about two people who had systematically destroyed her life while pretending to care about her. The emotional manipulation, the lies, the calculated betrayal, it all made sense now. How many times had Zara been there during the divorce, offering comfort while secretly planning her own future with Kwame? How many private conversations had they shared, laughing about Amara's pain while building their own happiness on the ruins of her marriage? Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed a woman transformed. Gone was the defeated divorcee who had questioned her own worth. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, more determined. The African marriage drama that had once threatened to destroy her was about to become the foundation for something else entirely. Amara walked to her home office, a study in cream and gold that overlooked the Lagos Lagoon. She pulled out her laptop and began typing, her fingers moving with swift precision across the keyboard. If Kwame and Zara wanted to play games with her life, she'd show them what a real game looked like. The first email went to her lawyer, a brilliant woman named Adoni Baker who had helped her navigate the divorce. The second went to her accountant. The third went to a private investigator she'd used to verify some of Kwame's business dealings during their marriage, a man who had found more than either of them had expected. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Amara made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to be the victim of this story anymore. She was going to be the author of her own revenge. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, saw the news. So sorry, Amara. If you need anything, I'm here. Dele. Dele. Her first love from university, now a successful lawyer in Abuja. They'd reconnected recently on social media, their conversations growing longer and more intimate as they'd reminisced about their shared past. He was divorced too, understood the pain of betrayal, the struggle to rebuild after everything you'd believed in crumbled. As she typed her response, Amara smiled for the first time since seeing the wedding invitation. The revenge story that was about to unfold would be more devastating than anything Kwame and Zara could have imagined. But first, she had to attend their wedding. The soft knock on Amara's office door interrupted her planning session. She looked up from the stack of documents spread across her mahogany desk to see her housekeeper, Mrs. Adebayo, standing in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Ma, there's someone here to see you," says her name is Zara. Amara's pen paused mid-signature on a contract that would change everything. After 3 days of radio silence following the wedding announcement, Zara had finally worked up the courage to face her. The audacity was breathtaking, but not surprising. Zara had always been skilled at emotional manipulation, able to twist situations to make herself the victim even when she was clearly the perpetrator. "Show her in," Amara said, her voice calm as still water. Zara entered the office looking exactly as she always did, perfectly put together in a tailored cream blazer and designer jeans, her Brazilian weave falling in glossy waves past her shoulders. But there was something different about her confidence, a slight tremor in her smile that suggested she wasn't as composed as she appeared. "Amara," she said, her voice pitched in that carefully modulated tone she used when she wanted something. "I've been trying to call you." "I know." Amara gestured to the chair across from her desk without looking up from her documents. "I've been busy." Zara sat down, crossing her legs and smoothing her blazer in a gesture Amara recognized as nervousness masquerading as nonchalance. "I suppose you've seen the news about Kwame and me." The wedding invitation was hard to miss. Amara finally looked up, meeting Zara's eyes with a steady gaze. "Congratulations. Though I have to say, the timing is interesting." A flush crept up Zara's neck, but she maintained her composure. This was the dance they'd perfected over 15 years of friendship, the careful verbal sparring disguised as concern, the ability to wound with kindness. But now the stakes were different, the game more deadly. Amara, I need you to know that this wasn't planned. Kwame and we found comfort in each other during a difficult time. You were going through so much with the divorce, and he was struggling too. We never meant for it to happen. The lie was so smoothly delivered, so perfectly crafted, that Amara almost admired the skill involved. Zara had always been a gifted storyteller, able to reshape reality to fit her narrative. It was part of what had made her such a successful event planner, the ability to create beautiful fantasies that people wanted to believe in. Which difficult time would that be? Amara asked, picking up her Mont Blanc pen and twirling it between her fingers. When you were helping me gather evidence of his affairs during our marriage. Or when you were encouraging me to fight for full custody of our children. Zara's composure slipped for just a moment, a micro-expression of panic flickering across her features before she regained control. You're hurt, and I understand that. But please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than what needs to be? Your marriage to my ex-husband 3 months after our divorce was finalized. The fact that you've been lying to me for, how long exactly? Amara. No. Amara's voice cut through the air like a blade. Let me guess. You're here because you want me to be understanding. You want me to give you my blessing, maybe even attend the wedding. You want to convince me that this is all just an unfortunate coincidence, that you and Kwame are truly in love and didn't mean to hurt anyone. Zara straightened in her chair, her mask finally slipping to reveal something colder underneath. I came here out of respect for our friendship. I didn't have to come at all. Our friendship. Amara laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Tell me, Zara, when exactly did our friendship end? Was it when you started sleeping with my husband during our marriage? Or was it earlier, when you realized you wanted everything I had? That's not fair. True. Amara stood up, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Lagos Island. The city sprawled before her, a testament to ambition and resilience, to the ability to build something beautiful from chaos. I've had 3 days to think about this, Zara. 3 days to remember all the little things that didn't make sense at the time. She turned back to face her former friend, her voice taking on a conversational tone that was somehow more menacing than anger. Like how you always knew where Kwame was when I couldn't reach him. How you were so quick to encourage me to file for divorce instead of trying to save my marriage. How you seemed to know details about our financial situation that I'd never shared with you. Zara's perfectly manicured hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white against her dark skin. You're being paranoid. Am I? Or am I finally seeing clearly for the first time in years? Amara moved back to her desk, but didn't sit down. Instead, she leaned against it, crossing her arms. I hired a private investigator during the divorce, you know. To make sure Kwame wasn't hiding assets. The man is very thorough. The color drained from Zara's face so quickly that Amara thought she might faint. It was a telling reaction, confirmation that there were secrets yet to be uncovered, truths that neither Kwame nor Zara wanted exposed. What did you find? Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. Enough. Amara picked up a manila folder from her desk and held it casually, not opening it but letting its presence speak for itself. Enough to understand that this betrayal goes much deeper than a simple affair. Enough to realize that you've been playing a very long game. Zara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I don't have to listen to this. I came here to try to preserve what's left of our friendship, but if you're going to make accusations. Sit down. The command was delivered in such a calm, authoritative tone that Zara found herself sinking back into the chair before she could stop herself. Amara had never spoken to her like this before, with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Amara continued, her voice still conversational. At the Eco Hotel. Very expensive, very public. I imagine the guest list includes everyone who matters in Lagos society, politicians, business leaders, socialites. The kind of people whose opinions can make or break careers. What's your point? My point is that you've built your entire business on your reputation. Event planning for Lagos's elite requires trust, discretion, the belief that you're someone who can keep secrets and maintain confidentiality. What happens to Zara events when people start questioning your character? When they wonder what other lies you've told, what other friends you've betrayed? Zara's breathing had become shallow, her composure completely shattered now. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth. Share the evidence I've gathered. Ensure that everyone knows exactly who you really are. Amara opened the folder and glanced at the first page, her expression thoughtful. You know, I always wondered how you managed to steal the Adebayo anniversary party from me 2 years ago. Such a lucrative contract, and they were my clients first. But according to these bank records, it seems Kwame helped you underbid me using information about my profit margins that only he would have had access to. The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Lagos traffic. Zara looked like a woman facing execution, her perfect facade crumbling to reveal the calculating opportunist underneath. What do you want? She finally asked. Amara smiled, and for the first time since the conversation began, it reached her eyes. I want you to understand something very clearly, Zara. You may have won Kwame, but you've made an enemy of the wrong woman. You're about to marry a man who's already proven he can't be trusted, and you're doing it after destroying a friendship that meant everything to me. She closed the folder and placed it back on her desk. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know that I'm done being the victim in this story. What happens next is up to you. Zara stood up on unsteady legs, her designer handbag clutched like a shield against her chest. Amara, please. We can work this out. No, we can't. Because you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. Amara returned to her chair, picking up her pen as if the conversation was already over. Mrs. Adebayo will show you out. As Zara reached the door, she turned back one last time. You think you know everything, but you don't. This isn't over. You're right, Amara said without looking up from her documents. It's not over. It's just beginning. After Zara left, Amara sat in the silence of her office, listening to her own heartbeat. The first move had been made, the battle lines drawn. Now the real work could begin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dele, flying to Lagos tomorrow for business. Would love to take you to dinner if you're free. The timing was perfect. Better than perfect. It was destiny. The 4 Points by Sheraton restaurant buzzed with the quiet elegance of Lagos's business elite enjoying their evening meals. Amara arrived precisely on time, wearing a flowing emerald dress that complemented her skin tone and projected confidence without being ostentatious. She spotted Dele immediately at a corner table with a view of the lagoon, and her breath caught slightly at how distinguished he looked in his navy suit. 15 years had been kind to Dele Adeniyi. The boy she'd loved at the University of Lagos had grown into a man of substance, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair that only added to his appeal. His law practice in Abuja had made him wealthy and influential, but more importantly, time had given him a quiet strength that she found incredibly attractive. Amara. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that made her remember why she'd fallen for him in the first place. You look absolutely stunning. Flattery will get you everywhere, she said with a smile that felt more genuine than any she'd worn in months. It's so good to see you. As they settled into conversation over wine and pepper soup, Amara felt some of the tension she'd been carrying begin to ease. Dele had always been easy to talk to, possessed of a sharp wit and genuine interest in her thoughts that made her feel seen in a way she'd forgotten was possible. "So," he said after they'd covered the basics of catching up, "I have to ask about this wedding announcement I've been seeing all over social media. Your ex-husband and your best friend. That's got to be difficult." Amara took a sip of her wine, choosing her words carefully. "Difficult is one word for it. Illuminating is another." "Meaning?" "Meaning I'm learning that some betrayals are actually gifts in disguise. They show you who people really are, strip away all the pretense and reveal the truth underneath." She met his eyes across the table. "Sometimes you need to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually deserve." Dele reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I know something about that. My divorce taught me that sharing a house with someone isn't the same as sharing a life with them." The simple touch sent electricity up Amara's arm, a reminder of physical attraction she'd almost forgotten existed. During her marriage to Kwame, intimacy had become perfunctory, scheduled around business meetings and social obligations. She'd convinced herself that was normal, that passion was something that belonged to younger people. "Tell me about your practice," she said, partly to change the subject and partly because she was genuinely curious. "The last time we talked seriously, you were just starting out." "Well, that was a long time ago." Dele's smile was self-deprecating. "Now I specialize in corporate law, with a focus on international business transactions. A lot of work with companies expanding between Nigeria and other West African markets." "That sounds lucrative." "It is. But more than that, it's interesting. I get to help businesses grow, create jobs, build connections across borders." He paused, studying her face. "What about you? I've been following your success with the boutiques. Very impressive." "Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but I love it. There's something satisfying about building something from nothing, proving that you can stand on your own." She lifted her glass in a mock toast. "To independence." "To independence," he agreed, clinking his glass against hers. "And to reconnecting with old friends." As the evening progressed, their conversation grew more intimate, touching on their failed marriages, their children, their hopes for the future. Dele had a daughter from his marriage, now 16 and living with her mother in Abuja. He spoke about her with genuine affection and concern, revealing a depth of paternal love that Kwame had never shown for Kemi and Tond. "I have to be honest with you," Dele said as they shared dessert. "When I heard about your divorce, part of me was happy. Not that you were going through pain, but that maybe we'd have a chance to reconnect." The admission hung between them, loaded with possibility. Amara felt a flutter of something she'd thought was dead: hope, attraction, the thrilling uncertainty of new romance. "Dele, I know it's complicated. The timing might not be ideal. But I never stopped thinking about what we had, wondering what might have been if we'd made different choices." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her nanny. "Tond is running a fever and asking for you. Can you come home?" "I'm so sorry," she said, showing him the message. "I have to go. Tond is sick." "Of course. Let me drive you." "You don't have to." "I want to." The drive to her house in Ikoyi was comfortable despite the underlying tension. Dele asked thoughtful questions about her children, remembered details from their earlier conversations, made it clear that her role as a mother was something he respected rather than merely tolerated. When they arrived at her house, he walked her to the door but didn't presume to come in. Instead, he took her hands in his and looked directly into her eyes. "I know you're dealing with a lot right now. I don't want to add pressure or complicate things. But I want you to know that I'm here, for whatever you need. As a friend, as someone who cares about you, as whatever you want me to be." The kiss happened naturally, softly, a gentle exploration that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they broke apart, Amara felt dizzy with possibility. "I should go check on Tond," she said, though part of her wanted to invite him in. Consequences be damned. Of course. Text me and let me know he's okay. I will. As she watched him drive away, Amara realized that her revenge against Kwame and Zara had just taken on an entirely new dimension. It wasn't enough anymore to simply expose their betrayal or damage their reputations. She wanted to show them what real love looked like, what a genuine partnership could be. Inside, she found Tom curled up on the couch with Mrs. Adebayo, his fever breaking as children's fevers often do, dramatically and suddenly. Kemi was doing homework at the dining table, but looked up with curious eyes as her mother entered. "How was your dinner, Mama?" "It was very nice, sweetheart." "How are you feeling about everything that's been happening?" Kemi put down her pen and considered the question with the seriousness of a 12-year-old trying to make sense of adult complications. "I think Daddy and Auntie Zara are being mean to you. And I don't understand why grown-ups have to lie so much." The observation was so innocently profound that Amara felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter was watching her, learning from her response to this crisis, forming ideas about strength and dignity and how to handle betrayal. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt other people," Amara said carefully. "The important thing is how we respond. We can choose to be bitter, or we can choose to build something better." "Are you going to build something better, Mama?" Amara thought about Dele's case, about the manila folder full of evidence on her desk, about the wedding that would take place in 2.5 weeks. "Yes, my love. I am." That night, after the children were asleep, Amara sat in her home office reviewing the private investigator's report one more time. The evidence was damning, not just of the affair, but of financial improprieties that could destroy both Kwame's and Zara's businesses. Bank transfers, forged documents, client lists that had been shared illegally. A pattern of deception that went back years. Her phone rang, interrupting her concentration. The caller ID showed Kwame's number, which surprised her. They rarely spoke directly anymore, usually communicating through lawyers or their children. "Amara, we need to talk." His voice sounded strained, lacking its usual arrogant confidence. Something had rattled him, and she suspected she knew what. "About what?" "About Zara's visit to your office yesterday. About whatever you think you know." Amara leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. So Zara had run straight to Kwame, had confessed that Amara was onto them. Good. Let them sweat. "I don't think I know anything, Kwame. I know everything." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken threats. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "The same thing I've always wanted. The truth." "And if I give you the truth? What then?" Amara looked out her window at the lights of Lagos, at the city that had shaped her into the woman she was becoming. "Then we'll see what kind of man you really are." But even as she said the words, she knew the truth wouldn't be enough. Not anymore. The game had changed, the stakes had risen, and she was no longer interested in playing defense. The funeral parlor on Edineron Ogunsanya Street in Suralia was packed with mourners, the air thick with grief and the scent of white lilies. Amara stood near the back, dressed in traditional black osok, her presence both respectful and strategic. She hadn't expected to see Kwame and Zara at Chief Adebayo's funeral, but their attendance made perfect sense. The old man had been one of Lagos's most influential businessmen, and his family remained connected to everyone who mattered in their social circle. What made the situation deliciously perfect was that this was the same Chief Adebayo whose anniversary party Zara had stolen from her 2 years ago, using inside information from Kwame. The irony wasn't lost on Amara as she watched Zara navigate the crowd of mourners, playing the role of concerned event planner offering comfort to the grieving family. "Such a sad day," came a familiar voice beside her. Dele had arrived quietly, looking distinguished in his black suit. Chief Adebayo was a good man. Yes, he was, Amara agreed, though her eyes were focused on Kwame and Zara across the room. He was also very particular about loyalty and honesty in business. Dele followed her gaze and understanding dawned in his expression. Oh. This is about more than paying respect. Everything is connected in Lagos, Amara said softly. Chief Adebayo's family trusted Zara with their most important celebration because they believed she was a woman of integrity. They paid her premium rates because they thought she was honest. As if sensing their scrutiny, Zara looked up from her conversation with Mrs. Adebayo and spotted Amara across the room. Even from a distance, the shock on her face was visible. She said something quickly to the widow and began making her way through the crowd, Kwame following close behind. Amara, Zara's voice was carefully modulated, but there was an edge of desperation underneath. I didn't expect to see you here. Chief Adebayo was a family friend, Amara replied smoothly. He gave me some of my first business advice when I was starting my boutiques. I owed him that respect. Kwame stepped forward, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. We need to talk. Privately. I don't think this is the appropriate place, Dele interjected, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to courtrooms and negotiations. And you are. Kwame's tone was dismissive, but Amara caught the flicker of recognition in his eyes. Dele Adeniyi, he said, extending his hand with professional courtesy that forced Kwame to shake it. I believe we met briefly at university. You were dating Amara at the time. The reminder of their shared history hung in the air like a challenge. Kwame's grip tightened on Dele's hand for a moment longer than necessary before he released it. That was a long time ago, Kwame said. Some things are worth remembering, Dele replied, moving slightly closer to Amara in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Zara, meanwhile, had gone pale watching this exchange. The implication was clear, Amara wasn't just moving on from her marriage, she was moving on with someone who represented everything Kwame wasn't. Where Kwame was flashy and superficial, Dele was substantial and genuine. Where Kwame had proven himself untrustworthy, Dele offered stability and respect. Excuse me, are you Zara Okafor? An elderly woman approached their group, interrupting the tense standoff. Amara recognized her as Mrs. Adebayo's sister, one of Lagos's most prominent society matrons. Yes, I am, Zara said, forcing a smile. I wanted to thank you for the beautiful work you did on our anniversary celebration. It was perfect, exactly what we wanted. The woman's voice carried clearly in the quiet space, drawing attention from nearby mourners. Chief Adebayo always said you were the most honest event planner in Lagos, that we could trust you with our most precious memories. The compliment should have been flattering, but in the context of everything that had happened, it sounded more like an indictment. Amara watched as Zara's smile became more strained, her discomfort palpable. Thank you, Ma. That means everything to me. Such integrity is rare in business these days, the woman continued, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. Chief always said that a person's word is their bond, that trust once broken can never be fully repaired. Kwame placed a protective hand on Zara's elbow, preparing to steer her away from the conversation. But the damage was done, other mourners had overheard, were nodding in agreement, murmuring about the importance of honesty and character in their business dealings. We should let you get back to your family, Amara said gently to the elderly woman. Please accept our condolences. As the woman moved away, Kwame's mask finally slipped completely. Very subtle, he hissed under his breath. But if you think public embarrassment is going to stop our wedding, you're mistaken. I'm not trying to stop your wedding, Amara replied calmly. I'm simply attending a funeral and paying my respects to a man who valued honesty above all else. Cut the innocent act, Amara. We know what you're doing. Dele stepped forward, his presence a quiet but unmistakable warning. I think you need to lower your voice. This is neither the time nor the place for personal disputes. Stay out of this, Kwame snapped. This is between me and my ex-wife. Actually, Dele said, his tone remaining level despite the provocation, when you raise your voice to a woman in public, it becomes everyone's business. Especially when that woman is someone I care about. The declaration sent a visible shockwave through both Kwame and Zara. This wasn't just about old friendships or business rivalries anymore, this was about Amara building a new life with someone who clearly valued and respected her in ways they never had. Dele, Amara placed a gentle hand on his arm. Let's go pay our respects to the family. As they walked away, leaving Kwame and Zara standing awkwardly in the middle of the funeral parlor, Amara felt a surge of satisfaction. She hadn't had to say anything directly damaging, she'd simply let the truth speak for itself through the words of others. That was masterfully done, Dele murmured as they approached the bereaved family. You've got them rattled without firing a single direct shot. The best revenge isn't always the loudest, Amara replied. Sometimes it's just showing people who you really are. They spent the next hour circulating through the crowd, Amara introducing Dele to business associates and family friends, making it clear that she was moving forward with strength and dignity. Every conversation reinforced her reputation as a successful businesswoman and devoted mother, while subtly highlighting the contrast between her character and that of her ex-husband and former friend. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Adebayo approached them near the exit. The widow was elegant in her grief, carrying herself with the dignity of a woman who had loved deeply and was now learning to live with loss. Amara, my dear, thank you for coming. Chief would have been pleased to see you here. He was a good man, Ma. He taught me so much about business and integrity. Yes, he always spoke highly of you. Said you had the character to build something lasting. Mrs. Adebayo glanced toward where Kwame and Zara stood near the flowers, deep in what appeared to be an urgent conversation. He also always said that people's true natures eventually reveal themselves, that time and pressure expose what's really inside a person. The observation hung in the air like a blessing and a warning combined. As Amara and Dele made their way to his car, she felt the pieces of her plan clicking into place with satisfying precision. They looked shaken, Dele observed as he held open the passenger door for her. Good. They should be. Amara settled into the leather seat, her mind already moving to the next phase. Fear makes people careless, and careless people make mistakes. What's the next move? Amara smiled, thinking about the phone calls she would make that evening, the conversations that would be had in Lagos's most exclusive social circles. Patience. Let them think they know what I'm planning. Let them prepare for the wrong battle. As they drove through the Lagos traffic, Dele reached over and took her hand. You know I'm in this with you, whatever comes next. The simple declaration sent warmth flooding through her chest. For so long, she'd fought her battles alone, believing that independence meant isolation. But here was a man offering partnership without demanding control, support without requiring submission. It might get messy, she warned. I've handled messy before. Besides, his smile was both tender and dangerous. Anyone who hurts you has to deal with me now. That evening, after ensuring her children were settled with their homework and dinner, Amara retreated to her office for a series of carefully planned phone calls. The first went to her private investigator. Mr. Oladil, I need you to expand the investigation. I want to know everything about their relationship, when it really started, where they've been meeting, what financial entanglements exist beyond what we've already discovered. How deep do you want me to dig? All the way to the bottom. I want documentation, photographs, witnesses. I want enough evidence to destroy them both if necessary. The second call went to her lawyer, Adoni Bakir. Adoni, I need to know what legal options we have regarding the custody arrangement. If I can prove that Kwame was having an affair during our marriage, and that he's been financially irresponsible, can we revisit the custody agreement? Possibly. What kind of evidence do you have? Enough to raise serious questions about his character and judgment. I'm particularly concerned about his ability to provide a stable environment for the children if he's marrying someone who's proven herself untrustworthy. The third call was to her accountant. I want a complete audit of all business transactions between my companies and any entities connected to Kwame or Zara over the past 5 years. I want to know every penny that's changed hands, every favor that's been granted, every opportunity that might have been shared inappropriately. By the time she finished the calls, it was nearly midnight, but Amara felt more energized than she had in months. For too long, she'd been reactive, responding to Kwame's betrayals, Zara's manipulations, society's judgments. Now she was taking control, shaping the narrative, writing her own ending. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number: "Stop digging or you regret it." Instead of fear, Amara felt a surge of excitement. They were scared enough to make threats, which meant she was on the right track. She screenshot the message and forwarded it to her lawyer, then blocked the number. Another message came through immediately from a different number: "This is bigger than you know. Walk away." This time, she laughed out loud. If they thought intimidation would work on her, they had seriously underestimated who she'd become. The scared, dependent wife who had begged Kwame to go to counseling was gone, replaced by a woman who had built a business empire from scratch and learned to thrive on her own terms. She was still smiling when her phone rang with Dele's number. "I just wanted to hear your voice before I went to sleep," he said, his deep baritone sending shivers down her spine. Today was intense. It was perfect. They have no idea what's coming next. And what is coming next? Amara looked out her office window at the glittering lights of Lagos, at the city that had taught her that survival required strategy, that success demanded both patience and ruthlessness. "Justice," she said simply. "And maybe something even better than that." As she hung up and prepared for bed, Amara felt the satisfaction of pieces falling into place. In less than 2 weeks, Kwame and Zara would stand before their friends and family and make vows about love and loyalty and commitment. But by then, everyone in that room would know exactly what those vows were worth. The domestic betrayal that had nearly destroyed her was about to become the foundation for something far more powerful, a demonstration of what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock, delivered by hand to Amara's office on a busy Thursday morning. Gold-embossed lettering announced a pre-wedding celebration at Zara's penthouse apartment in Banana Island, an intimate gathering for our closest friends and family to celebrate love and new beginnings. Amara studied the invitation while her assistant, Kwame, waited nervously by her desk. The girl had been with her for 2 years, loyal and efficient, but still young enough to be awed by the drama unfolding around her boss. "Ma, should I RSVP that you won't be attending?" Kwame asked hesitantly. "Actually, yes. RSVP that I'll be there." Amara set the invitation aside and returned to reviewing inventory reports from her Lekki store. "And call my stylist. Tell her I need something spectacular for Saturday evening." "Ma." Kwame's confusion was evident in her voice. If someone invites you to watch them celebrate their betrayal, the least you can do is dress appropriately for the occasion. That afternoon, Amara met her private investigator at a quiet cafe in Victoria Island. Mr. Oladile was a thin, unremarkable man who had built his reputation on being forgettable, the kind of person who could blend into any crowd and observe without being noticed. "What did you find?" she asked without preamble. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "More than you expected, I suspect. The affair started 18 months ago, not recently as they claim. There are hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even vacation photos from a trip to Dubai they took while you were visiting your mother in Enugu." Amara felt the familiar eye settle in her stomach. 18 months ago, she'd been planning their 10th wedding anniversary celebration, believing their marriage was worth fighting for despite its problems. The emotional manipulation had been even more extensive than she'd realized. "There's more," Mr. Oladile continued. "Financial records show they've been planning this for a long time. Zara's been gradually shifting her business operations to align with Kwame's connections, using information about your client base to steal contracts. The Adibio anniversary was just the beginning. What kind of financial entanglements? Joint investments, shared business accounts, properties purchased together. They've been building a life together for over a year, funded partly by opportunities stolen from your businesses. Amara opened the envelope and began scanning the documents. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds, a paper trail of systematic betrayal that went far beyond simple infidelity in marriage. There's one more thing, the investigator said, his voice dropping lower. The threatening messages you received. They came from Kwame's personal phone, though he used apps to mask the number. The revelation shouldn't have surprised her, but it still sent a chill down her spine. The man she'd loved, married, and built a family with was now threatening her for seeking the truth about his betrayal. Is this enough to affect the custody arrangement? More than enough. But Mrs. Okonkwo, you should be careful. People with this much to lose can become dangerous when cornered. That evening, Amara sat in her living room with Kemi and Tond, helping with homework while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd learned. Her children were watching her carefully, sensitive to the tension that had filled their home since the wedding announcement. "Mama," Tond said, looking up from his mathematics workbook, "are you going to Daddy's wedding?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on her strategic planning that she hadn't considered how her children were processing this situation. "Why do you ask, my love?" "Some kids at school said their parents think it's wrong that Daddy is marrying Auntie Zara so soon. They said it means he was lying when he was still married to you." Children, Amara reflected, often cut straight to the heart of matters that adults danced around with euphemisms and explanations. "What do you think about it?" she asked gently. Kemi looked up from her English assignment. "I think Auntie Zara was pretending to be our friend when she was really being mean to you. And I think Daddy cares more about himself than about how we feel." The mature assessment from her 12-year-old daughter both broke Amara's heart and filled her with pride. These children were learning hard lessons about trust and betrayal, but they were also developing strong moral compasses in the process. "Whatever happens," Amara said, pulling both children closer to her on the couch, "you are my priority. Everything I do is to protect our family and build a good future for us." "Are you going to marry Uncle Dele?" Ton asked with the directness of an 8-year-old. The question made Amara smile despite everything. "Uncle Dele and I are good friends. Whatever happens between us will happen slowly and carefully, because you two are the most important people in my life." "We like Uncle Dele," Kemi said practically. "He asks us real questions and listens to our answers. Daddy never did that." The observation was devastatingly accurate, and it reinforced Amara's determination to make sure her children grew up understanding what healthy relationships looked like. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Amara called Dele to update him on the day's discoveries. 18 months, she said without preamble when he answered. "That's how long they've been planning this." "Jesus. While you were still trying to save your marriage. While I was blaming myself for not being a good enough wife. While I was going to counseling alone because he was too busy with work. While I was planning our anniversary celebration." Her voice remained steady, but Dele could hear the underlying fury. "What are you going to do with the evidence?" "I'm going to their pre-wedding party on Saturday." "Amara, that sounds like walking into a trap." "Maybe. Or maybe it's time to spring one of my own." She explained her plan, watching Dele's expression shift from concern to admiration as he realized the elegance of what she was proposing. "That's either brilliant or insane," he said finally. "Sometimes those are the same thing." She paused, studying his face through the video call. "I need to know you're with me on this. If we do this, there's no going back. It will be public, messy, and permanent. I told you I'm in this with you. I meant it. Even if it damages your reputation, your practice, your political connections." Dele leaned forward, his expression serious. "Amara, I've spent the last 15 years building a life that looked successful from the outside but felt empty inside. Being with you, supporting you, fighting alongside you, this is the first time in years that I've felt truly alive. Whatever consequences come, they are worth it." The declaration sent warmth flooding through her chest. This was what partnership was supposed to feel like, not the constant negotiations and compromises that had characterized her marriage to Kwame, but a meeting of equals who chose to face the world together. "Then we do this together," she said. "But I want you to promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong, if they find a way to turn this around on us, you walk away. You protect yourself and your daughter. I won't have another person I care about destroyed by their manipulations. That's not going to happen. Promise me anyway." Dele was quiet for a long moment, understanding that this wasn't just about strategy, it was about her need to protect the people she loved, even from the consequences of her own choices. "I promise to be smart about this. But I won't promise to abandon you. Those days are over, Amara. You don't fight alone anymore." As they ended the call, Amara felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety that came before major battles. In 3 days, she would walk into Zara's penthouse surrounded by people who had whispered about her divorce, pitied her betrayal, and watched her fall from grace. But she wouldn't be walking in as the victim anymore. She would be walking in as a woman who had built something better from the ashes of what she'd lost, armed with the truth and flanked by a man who understood her worth. The co-parenting conflict, the public disgrace, the financial manipulations, all of it was about to come to a head in the most public way possible. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Amara was looking forward to the confrontation. The penthouse elevator climbed toward the 35th floor of Zara's Banana Island building, carrying Amara toward what would either be her greatest triumph or most spectacular failure. She studied her reflection in the mirrored walls, adjusting the flowing silk of her burgundy dress, a creation by a rising Nigerian designer that managed to be both elegant and subtly provocative. Beside her, Dele looked devastating in a tailored charcoal suit, his presence both comforting and commanding. They'd spent the morning rehearsing their approach, anticipating questions and reactions, preparing for every possible scenario. "Remember," Amara murmured as the elevator approached the top floor, "we're here to celebrate their love." "Of course," Dele replied, his smile sharp as a blade. "Nothing but happiness for the happy couple." The elevator doors opened to reveal Zara's penthouse in full party mode. The space was decorated with white roses and gold accents, elegant and expensive, designed to showcase the host's impeccable taste and financial success. About 40 guests mingled on the expansive terrace overlooking Lagos Island, sipping champagne and pretending not to gossip about the evening's most anticipated attendees. Zara spotted them immediately, her face cycling through surprise, panic, and forced composure in the span of seconds. She was stunning in a flowing white cocktail dress that managed to be bridal without being too obvious, her hair swept up in an elaborate style that had probably taken hours to perfect. "Amara," she said, gliding across the room with a champagne flute in hand and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it," Amara replied, accepting the air kisses with practiced grace. "Your home is beautiful. And Dele, you remember Zara?" "Of course. Congratulations on the engagement." Dele's tone was perfectly cordial, giving no hint of the disdain Amara knew he felt. Kwame appeared at Zara's side, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. He looked older than Amara remembered, stress lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. Success in business hadn't translated to personal happiness, apparently. "Amara." "Dele." His greeting was curt, barely civil. "Kwame," Amara smiled warmly. "You look well. Marriage suits you." The barb was delivered so sweetly that it took a moment for its meaning to register. They weren't married yet, and everyone in the room knew it. The reminder that he was celebrating an engagement while his divorce was barely 6 months old sent a ripple of discomfort through the nearby guests. "Let me introduce you to some people," Zara said quickly, steering the conversation away from dangerous territory. For the next hour, Amara and Dele circulated through the party, playing their roles to perfection. She was gracious and dignified, speaking warmly about moving forward and finding new happiness. He was charming and attentive, making it clear that Amara had not only recovered from her divorce but had found something better. The other guests watched this performance with fascination. Lagos society loved drama, but they also respected strength and grace under pressure. With every conversation, Amara was rehabilitating her reputation while raising questions about the character of her replacements. "She's handling this beautifully," Amara overheard one woman say to another. "Such dignity." "Yes, and that man of hers is absolutely gorgeous. Much better than Kwame, if you ask me." As the evening progressed, Amara noticed Kwame and Zara growing increasingly tense. They were watching her too closely, anticipating some dramatic confrontation that wasn't coming. She was simply being herself, successful, composed, happy, and somehow that was more threatening than any accusation could have been. The moment she'd been waiting for came when Chief Adebayo's widow approached their small group near the bar. Mrs. Adebayo was one of Lagos's most respected society matrons, her opinions carrying significant weight in their social circle. "Amara, my dear, you look radiant. I'm so happy to see you thriving." "Thank you, Ma. You're very kind. And this must be the lawyer I've been hearing about?" Mrs. Adebayo smiled at Dele with genuine warmth. "Dele Adeniyi, isn't it? Your reputation precedes you. The honor is mine, Ma. Please accept my condolences again on your husband's passing." "Thank you. He would have liked you, I think. He always said that a person's character shows in how they treat others during difficult times." Her gaze shifted meaningfully toward Kwame and Zara. "Some people rise above challenges, while others reveal their true nature under pressure." The observation hung in the air like a challenge. Several other guests had drifted closer, drawn by the subtle tension in the conversation. "Speaking of character," Mrs. Adebayo continued, "Amara, I wanted to thank you again for your discretion during that unfortunate business with my anniversary party." Amara felt every eye in the group focus on her. This was the moment, the opening she'd been hoping for without having to create it herself. "I'm not sure what you mean, Ma." "Well, when we discovered that some of our confidential information had been shared inappropriately, you chose not to make it a public matter. That showed real class, especially given what you were going through personally at the time." The color drained from Zora's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Kwame's grip tightened on his champagne glass until Amara worried it might shatter. "Information sharing can be such a delicate matter in business," Dele said conversationally. "Professional ethics are so important, especially in service industries where trust is everything." "Exactly." Mrs. Adebayo nodded emphatically. "When someone betrays that trust, it reflects on their entire character. My husband used to say that if someone will cheat in business, they'll cheat in life." More guests were gathering now, drawn by the increasingly charged atmosphere. Amara could see other business owners in the crowd, people who had worked with both her and Zara, people who were beginning to understand the implications of what was being discussed. "Ma," Zara finally found her voice, though it came out as little more than a whisper. "I think there might be some misunderstanding." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding, dear," Mrs. Adebayo said with the serene confidence of a woman who had lived long enough to see through most deceptions. "We had documentation. Bank records showing exactly how our confidential pricing information reached your company. It was quite thorough." The revelation sent a visible shockwave through the assembled guests. This wasn't just about a messy divorce anymore, this was about business fraud, professional ethics, and the kind of betrayal that could destroy reputations permanently. That's not. Kwame started to speak, but Mrs. Adebayo held up a hand. "The only reason we didn't pursue legal action was out of respect for Amara, who asked us not to. She said you were going through enough difficulties already." The elderly woman's smile was knife-sharp. Such generosity of spirit, especially toward people who had caused her so much pain. Amara felt the room's energy shift completely. She had become the victim who chose mercy over revenge, the wrong party who had protected her betrayers even as they destroyed her marriage. Kwame and Zara, meanwhile, were being revealed as people who had systematically violated both personal and professional trust. I think, Amara said gently, that we should focus on celebrating tonight. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. But the damage was done. The guests were already forming opinions, making mental notes, preparing the stories they would tell at tomorrow's business lunches and social gatherings. By morning, everyone who mattered in Lagos society would know that Kwame and Zara's relationship had been built on a foundation of lies, theft, and betrayal. Zara excused herself abruptly, claiming to need air. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Amara could see her on the terrace, talking urgently on her phone, gesturing frantically as she tried to do damage control. Kwame, meanwhile, had cornered Dele near the bar, his voice low but his body language aggressive. Amara couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Dele's calm, professional demeanor, his refusal to be drawn into whatever provocation Kwame was offering. The party continued, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Guests were leaving earlier than planned, their congratulations to the host seeming perfunctory and strained. The celebration of love and new beginnings had become something else entirely, a revelation of character that would have lasting consequences. As Amara and Dele prepared to leave, Zara intercepted them near the elevator, her composure completely shattered. "You planned this," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. "You orchestrated the whole thing." "I plan to attend your party and celebrate your engagement," Amara replied calmly. "I can't control what other people choose to say. You're destroying everything we've worked for." "No, Zara. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." As the elevator doors closed, cutting off Zara's stricken face, Amara felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She'd won this battle definitively, but the victory felt hollow without the friendship she thought was real. "That was masterful," Dele said as they descended toward the garage. "You didn't have to say anything directly damaging, you let them destroy themselves." "It's not over yet," Amara replied. "They still have the wedding. They'll try to spin this as jealousy or bitterness. But now everyone will be watching, questioning, looking for more evidence of who they really are." What she didn't mention was the satisfaction of seeing Kwame's face when he realized that she had moved on not just emotionally, but to someone better than him in every way. The emotional manipulation that had once made her question her own worth had been replaced by a partnership that celebrated her strength. As they drove through the Lagos night, Amara's phone buzzed with messages from friends and associates who had been at the party, wanting to know more, offering support, sharing their own suspicions about Kwame and Zara's relationship. The public disgrace she'd once endured was now being visited upon her betrayers, and it felt like the first real justice she'd experienced since discovering their affair. But she knew the final act was still to come. In 1 week, they would stand before God and Lagos society and make vows about love and fidelity and commitment. And when they did, everyone in attendance would be thinking about tonight, about Mrs. Adebayo's revelations, about the kind of people who could build their happiness on someone else's destruction. The law office of Bakr and Associates buzzed with urgent activity on the Tuesday before Kwame and Zara's wedding. Amara sat across from her lawyer, Adoni Bakr, reviewing documents that would reshape the custody arrangement and potentially alter the financial landscape of her divorce settlement. "The evidence is compelling," Adoni said, spreading photographs and bank statements across her desk. "Adultery during marriage, financial fraud involving your business information, and now threats against you for seeking the truth. We have grounds to revisit both custody and the property settlement." Amara studied the images, Kwame and Zara at restaurants, hotels, vacation destinations, all timestamped during her marriage. The emotional manipulation she'd endured now had a visual narrative, proof that her instincts hadn't been wrong despite Kwame's gaslighting. What about the children? I don't want them caught in the middle of a legal battle. That's exactly why this matters. We can argue that Kwame's deception and poor judgment make him unsuitable for joint custody. The threatening messages alone show a pattern of intimidation that family court won't ignore. Amara's phone buzzed with a call from her private investigator. She excused herself to take it, walking to the window that overlooked Lagos Island's financial district. Mrs. Okonkwo, you need to see this. I'm sending photos now. The images that appeared on her phone made her stomach clench. Kwame and Zara at what appeared to be a lawyer's office, accompanied by two men she didn't recognize but who had the unmistakable bearing of serious legal representation. Who are the other men? High-end criminal defense attorneys from Abuja. The kind you hire when you're expecting serious legal trouble. The implication hit her like a physical blow. They weren't just preparing for a wedding, they were preparing for war. The threatening messages, the aggressive posturing, the expensive lawyers, it all pointed to a coordinated effort to destroy her before she could expose them completely. There's more, the investigator continued. I've been monitoring their communications as you requested. They are planning something for the wedding day itself. I'm not sure what, but they've been very careful about discussing it over secure channels. As Amara returned to Adoni's desk, her mind raced through possibilities. What could they be planning that required criminal defense attorneys and such elaborate secrecy? We need to accelerate our timeline, she told her lawyer. File the custody modification request today. I want it served before the wedding. Amara, that's going to create a firestorm. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? They're the ones who made it public by flaunting their relationship and planning elaborate celebrations. If they wanted privacy, they should have thought about that before betraying everyone who trusted them. That afternoon, Amara met Dele at their favorite restaurant in Ikoyi, but neither of them had much appetite. The tension of the approaching confrontation had reached a breaking point, and they both knew that the next few days would determine everything. My contacts in Abuja are hearing rumors, Dele said quietly. Kwame's been reaching out to people in government, trying to call in favors and build protection. Whatever they're planning, it's big enough that they think they'll need political cover. Political cover for what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But Amara, I'm worried. People who hire criminal defense attorneys before they need them are planning to do things that require criminal defense. The waiter brought their drinks, and they sat in silence for a moment, watching Lagos traffic stream past the restaurant's windows. The city that had shaped them both was about to become the stage for a confrontation that neither of them could fully predict. There's something else, Dele said finally. I've been getting pressure at my firm. Partners asking questions about my relationship with you, wondering if it's affecting my judgment. Someone's been making calls, spreading rumors about my professional ethics. Amara felt ice settle in her stomach. She'd known they would try to hurt her, but dragging Dele into their machinations was a new level of cruelty. I'm sorry. I never wanted. Stop. His voice was firm but gentle. I made my choice with full knowledge of the risks. But it confirms that they see us as a real threat, not just an inconvenience. What kind of rumors? That I'm helping you fabricate evidence against them. That our relationship started during your marriage and I'm complicit in some kind of conspiracy. Dele's jaw tightened. Standard character assassination tactics, but effective if people want to believe them. That evening, as Amara tucked her children into bed, she felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. Kemi and Ton had been through so much upheaval already, and now she was about to subject them to even more public scrutiny and potential backlash. Mama, Kemi said as Amara turned off the bedside lamp, some of my friends' parents have been asking me questions about you and Uncle Dele. What kind of questions? When you started dating, whether you were dating before the divorce, stuff like that. Kemi's voice was matter of fact, But Amara could hear the underlying confusion. I told them Uncle Dele is nice and you're happy, but they kept asking. The emotional manipulation was extending to her children now, using them as sources of information to build cases against her. The realization filled Amara with a cold fury that surprised her with its intensity. Listen to me, she said, sitting back down on the bed. Some people are going to try to make trouble for our family. They are going to ask questions and spread rumors because they don't want to take responsibility for their own bad choices. But you don't have to answer questions from anyone except me, okay? Are we in trouble, Mama? No, my love. We're just dealing with people who think they can hurt us to make themselves feel better. But we are stronger than they think we are. After the children were asleep, Amara called her mother in Enugu, filling her in on the latest developments and asking her to be prepared for whatever might come next. Eneni, her mother said in Igbo, using the endearment that always made Amara feel safer, some fights you cannot avoid. But make sure you are fighting for the right reasons, not just for revenge. What's the difference, Mama? Revenge is about the past. Justice is about the future. Which one are you really seeking? The question haunted Amara as she prepared for bed. Was this about protecting her children and ensuring that truth prevailed? Or had it become something darker, a desire to watch her betrayer suffer as she had suffered? Her phone rang near midnight. Dele's name appeared on the screen, but when she answered, his voice was tight with controlled anger. They just served me with papers. A restraining order, claiming I've been harassing Kwame and making threats. Complete fabrication, but it's designed to keep me away from you during the wedding. Amara felt the room spin around her. A restraining order would destroy Dele's reputation, potentially end his career, and isolate her at the moment when she needed support most. Can we fight it? Yes, but not in time for Saturday. They've timed this perfectly, filed it late on a Tuesday night before a wedding weekend, knowing the court won't be able to address it quickly. As they talked through the implications, Amara realized that Kwame and Zara had been planning this assault for weeks. The pre-wedding party hadn't been a victory for her, it had been intelligence gathering for them. They'd watched her strategies, identified her weaknesses, and prepared countermeasures that would isolate her and discredit everything she'd worked to expose. They are not just trying to get married, she told Dele. They are trying to destroy me completely before I can destroy them. Then we need to be smarter than they are. This restraining order is their mistake. It shows premeditation, planning, coordination. That's going to work against them when we get to court. But not before the wedding. No. For the wedding, you're on your own. As Amara hung up the phone, she realized that Saturday's confrontation had just become much more dangerous and much more personal. They weren't just trying to silence her, they were trying to isolate her, discredit her, and destroy her support system. But isolation, she reflected, had taught her to be self-reliant. And being underestimated had always been her secret weapon. If they wanted to play dirty, she'd show them exactly how much she'd learned about survival in the years since her marriage ended. The woman who had begged Kwame to go to counseling was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Saturday's wedding was going to be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The Eco Hotel ballroom had been transformed into a vision of white and gold elegance, with cascading orchids and crystal chandeliers creating the perfect backdrop for Lagos society's wedding of the year. Amara arrived alone, precisely 30 minutes after the ceremony began, her entrance time to create maximum impact without appearing disrespectful. She wore midnight blue silk that flowed like water around her curves, her hair swept into an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings Dele had given her before the restraining order forced him away. Every head in the ballroom turned as she made her way to an empty seat in the back, her presence both magnetic and unsettling. The ceremony was already in progress, with Kwame and Zara standing before an ornate altar, their backs to the assembled guests. The minister was speaking about love and commitment, his voice carrying over the soft music and rustling silk of 300 carefully chosen attendees. Marriage is built on trust, the minister intoned, his words carrying an unintended irony that sent ripples of whispered commentary through the crowd. It requires honesty between partners, faithfulness in all things, and the courage to honor your vows even when tested by life's challenges. Amara watched from her strategic position, noting the tension in Kwame's shoulders, the way Zara's hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. They were performing happiness for an audience that was increasingly skeptical of their performance. The guest list read like a who's who of Lagos society, politicians, business moguls, entertainment industry figures, and social influencers whose opinions could make or break reputations overnight. Many of them had been at the pre-wedding party, had heard Mrs. Adebayo's revelations, and were now watching this ceremony with new eyes. Do you, Kwame Asante, take Zara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Kwame's voice carried clearly through the ballroom, but Amara caught the slight hesitation, the way his eyes searched the crowd as if looking for threats or escape routes. And do you, Zara Okafor, take Kwame to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, for as long as you both shall live? Zara's response was barely audible, her I do whispered into the microphone with none of the joy expected from a bride on her wedding day. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Amara felt no sadness, no regret, no lingering attachment to the man she'd once loved. Instead, she felt the cold satisfaction of watching people reap what they had sown. The reception that followed was a masterclass in social theater. Guests offered congratulations that seemed increasingly hollow, their conversations filled with the kind of careful language people used when they suspected scandal but hadn't yet decided how to respond to it. Amara moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, accepting condolences for her difficult situation, with grace and dignity that made her betrayers look petty by comparison. She danced with distinguished older men, laughed at appropriate moments, and generally presented herself as a woman who had not only survived betrayal but thrived despite it. Amara, Chief Ogondimu, one of Lagos's most respected businessmen, approached her during the cocktail hour. I wanted to speak with you about something delicate. She nodded, following him to a quieter corner of the ballroom where they could speak privately. I've been hearing disturbing rumors about business practices, about confidential information being shared inappropriately. Given your reputation for integrity, I wanted to ask your opinion. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the opportunity to speak truth to power without appearing vindictive or bitter. Chief, I've always believed that business success built on dishonesty is ultimately unsustainable. When people violate professional trust, it reflects on their character in all areas of life. Indeed. And the legal papers that were filed yesterday. The custody modification request item fraud and adultery during marriage. Word traveled fast in Lagos's elite circles. Amara wasn't surprised that details of her legal filings had already reached the wedding reception. I'm simply protecting my children's interest and ensuring they grow up understanding the importance of honesty and integrity. Chief Ogondimu nodded thoughtfully. Your children are fortunate to have a mother who prioritizes their character development over social convenience. As the evening progressed, similar conversations took place throughout the ballroom. Business associates questioning past dealings, society matrons reevaluating social alliances, political figures distancing themselves from potential scandal. Amara watched it all unfold with the detached fascination of a scientist observing an experiment. She provided the catalyst, but the reactions were entirely organic, people making their own judgments based on evidence and their own experiences with the bride and groom. Near midnight, as the reception began winding down, Kwame finally approached her. His wedding attire was rumpled, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like desperation. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and urgent. Congratulations on your marriage, Amara replied pleasantly. Zara looks beautiful. Cut the act, Amara. You know what you're doing. I'm attending your wedding reception and wishing you well. What else would I be doing? You're destroying our reputation, our businesses, our future. The custody filing, the rumors, the way you've been manipulating people, it has to stop. Amara took a sip of her champagne, studying her ex-husband with new eyes. The man she'd once found charismatic and powerful now seemed small, desperate, reduced to begging the woman he'd betrayed to show mercy he'd never offered her. I filed a legal motion to protect my children. As for rumors, I can't control what people think when they learn the truth about your character. The truth. You're twisting everything to make us look like monsters. Am I? Or are people simply seeing you clearly for the first time? Before Kwame could respond, Zara appeared at his side, her wedding dress wrinkled and her makeup smudged from what had clearly been tears. Please, she said, her voice breaking. I know you hate me, but don't destroy everything we've worked for. Think about the children, they need stability. The appeal to motherhood might have worked on the old Amara, the woman who'd prioritized keeping peace over seeking justice. But that woman had died the day she discovered their betrayal. You should have thought about the children before you decided to build your relationship on lies and theft. They are learning an important lesson about consequences. You're using them as weapons, Kwame accused. No, Amara's voice turned steel cold. You used them as shields while you destroyed their home. I'm teaching them that actions have consequences and that integrity matters more than social convenience. As she prepared to leave, Zara grabbed her arm with desperate fingers. What will it take? Money. A public apology. What do you want? Amara looked down at the hand on her arm, then back up at Zara's strict face. The woman who had once been her best friend was now a stranger, someone whose character had been revealed under pressure to be fundamentally selfish and dishonest. I want you to understand something, Amara said quietly, removing Zara's hand with gentle but firm pressure. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. You made choices, both of you, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. But the business losses, the social ostracism, it's too much. We didn't mean for things to go this far. You didn't mean to get caught. That's different from being sorry for what you did. As Amara walked toward the exit, she heard Kwame and Zara having an urgent whispered conversation behind her. Their wedding day, which should have been the culmination of their love story, had become instead a public revelation of their true characters. Outside the hotel, the Lagos night air was warm and humid, filled with the sounds of a city that never truly slept. Amara stood for a moment breathing it in, feeling the weight of the evening settling around her like a completed puzzle. Her phone buzzed with messages, from friends who had watched the reception coverage on social media, from business associates who wanted to distance themselves from any association with Kwame and Zara, from reporters who sensed a story worth telling. But the message that mattered most came from Dele. Watch the coverage online. You were magnificent. The restraining order hearing is Monday. We are going to destroy them in court. As her driver pulled up to take her home, Amara realized that tonight hadn't been an ending, it had been a beginning. The domestic betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had been transformed into something much more powerful, a demonstration of what happened when people underestimated a woman who had learned to fight for herself and her children. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate Kwame and Zara's triumph over her had become instead their very public downfall. And the best part was that she'd barely had to do anything beyond tell the truth and let their own actions speak for themselves. Tomorrow, Lagos society would wake up to a new understanding of who the real villains were in this story. And Amara would wake up ready for the final act of her revenge. The restraining order, the custody battle, the business investigations that were already beginning, all of it was just the opening move in a much larger game. A game she fully intended to win. The Lagos High Court was packed to capacity on Monday morning, with reporters, curious onlookers, and members of Lagos society filling every available seat. The hearing to dissolve the restraining order against Dele had attracted far more attention than a typical civil matter, thanks to the weekend's wedding drama and the social media coverage that had turned Amara's story into a cause célèbre. Dele sat with his legal team, his bearing calm and professional despite the character assassination he'd endured over the past week. Across the aisle, Kwame and Zara huddled with their expensive criminal defense attorneys, looking like people who had expected to be on their honeymoon instead of in court defending their reputations. Amara sat in the gallery, wearing a navy business suit that projected competence and respectability. She'd become something of a public figure over the weekend, with social media largely rallying to her side as the wrong woman who had conducted herself with dignity throughout an impossible situation. Judge Adibe Ogundimo, no relation to the businessman she'd spoken with at the wedding, called the court to order. He was known for his no-nonsense approach to justice and his intolerance for frivolous litigation. "We're here to determine the validity of the restraining order filed against Mr. Dele Adeniyi," the judge began. The petitioners claim harassment and threats. Mr. Adeniyi's counsel argues the order was filed maliciously to interfere with his legitimate relationship. Let's begin with the evidence. Kwame's lawyer, a sleek operator named Barrister Emeka Okafor, stood to present their case. He painted a picture of Dele as an obsessive ex-boyfriend who had been manipulating Amara and orchestrating a campaign of harassment against the newly married couple. "Your Honor, Mr. Adeniyi has been using his legal expertise and connections to fabricate evidence against my clients. He's been coaching Mrs. Okonkwo in her attempts to destroy their reputations and businesses through a series of calculated public humiliations. The accusations were smoothly delivered but lacked substantive evidence. When pressed for specific instances of harassment or threats, the lawyer could only point to Dele's presence at social events and his support for Amara's legal actions. Dele's attorney, a brilliant woman named Mrs. Folake Adenuga, rose for the defense with a stack of documents that would change everything. "Your Honor, this restraining order was filed as part of a coordinated campaign to silence my client and isolate Mrs. Okonkwo before she could expose the petitioner's pattern of fraud and deception." She began presenting evidence methodically: the timeline of Kwame and Zara's affair during his marriage, the financial fraud involving stolen business information, the threatening messages sent from Kwame's devices, and the coordination with expensive criminal defense attorneys before any crimes had been officially alleged. The petitioners hired criminal defense counsel before filing this restraining order, Mrs. Adenuga continued. That suggests they were planning activities that would require criminal defense, hardly the actions of innocent parties seeking protection from harassment. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as the evidence mounted. Phone records, bank statements, emails, and photographs painted a picture of systematic deception and premeditated legal manipulation. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that the petitioners have been conducting a campaign of character assassination against my client, spreading false rumors about his professional ethics and attempting to damage his law practice. She presented recordings of phone calls, screenshots of social media posts, and witness statements from people who had been contacted with false information about Dele's conduct. When Kwame was called to testify, his composure cracked under cross-examination. Mrs. Adenuga's questions were precise and devastating, forcing him to admit to the affair during his marriage, the sharing of Amara's confidential business information, and the threatening messages. "Mr. Asante, did you send threatening text messages to your ex-wife from masked numbers?" I was trying to protect my family from false accusations. By threatening the mother of your children. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A warning about what, exactly? What would she regret if she continued seeking the truth about your relationship with Miss Okafor? Kwame's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The courtroom had heard him admit to sending threatening messages to his ex-wife for seeking evidence of his betrayal. Zara's testimony was even more damaging. Under oath, she was forced to admit to using Amara's confidential business information to undercut her contracts, to lying about the timeline of her relationship with Kwame, and to coordinating the restraining order as a tactical maneuver rather than legitimate protection. Miss Okafor, were you in fear for your physical safety from Mr. Adeniyi? Well, not physical safety exactly. Did Mr. Adeniyi ever threaten you directly? Not in so many words, but... Yes or no, Miss Okafor? Did Mr. Adeniyi ever threaten you? No. Did he ever contact you inappropriately? No. Did he ever approach you in person outside of public social events? No. So this restraining order was based on your fear of what he might do, not what he had done. We were protecting ourselves from his manipulation of Amara. You were attempting to isolate a woman who had evidence of your fraudulent business practices and adultery during her marriage. The objection came too late. The courtroom had heard Zara admit that the restraining order was about silencing Amara, not protecting them from Dele. When the testimonies concluded, Judge Ogondimu's ruling was swift and comprehensive. This court finds that the restraining order was filed maliciously and without merit. The evidence shows a pattern of deception, fraud, and legal manipulation by the petitioners that constitutes an abuse of the court system. He ordered the immediate dissolution of the restraining order and awarded attorney's fees to Dele. But more damaging than the financial penalty was his public criticism of Kwame and Zara's conduct. The court is particularly disturbed by the evidence of business fraud, the threatening of a former spouse, and the attempt to use the legal system as a weapon to silence legitimate complaints. This behavior reflects poorly not only on the individuals involved but on the institution of marriage itself. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded all parties. Dele and Amara stood together, projecting unity and vindication, while Kwame and Zara hurried to a waiting car, shielding their faces from cameras and questions. Mrs. Okonkwo, one reporter called out, "What's your response to critics who say you're being vindictive?" "I'm protecting my children and ensuring they understand that actions have consequences," Amara replied calmly. "Truth isn't vindictive, it's just truth." "Mr. Adeniyi, will you be pressing charges for the false accusations?" "We are considering all legal options," Dele said. "But our primary focus is on moving forward and building positive lives for ourselves and our children." That evening, as they celebrated the victory at Dele's hotel suite, Amara felt a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The public vindication was complete. Legal society now understood who the real victims and villains were in this story. "It's over," Dele said, pouring champagne as they watched the sunset over Lagos Island. "Is it though?" Amara mused. "The court case is over, but they still have to live with what they've done. Their businesses, their reputations, their marriage, all of it built on a foundation of lies that everyone now knows about." "Do you feel sorry for them?" Amara considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have felt guilty about their downfall, would have wondered if she'd gone too far in seeking justice. But the woman she'd become understood that mercy without accountability was just enabling further harm. "I feel sorry for the people they could have been if they'd chosen honesty over deception. But I don't regret exposing who they really are." Her phone buzzed with a message from Kemi. "Mama, everyone at school is saying you won in court today. I'm proud of you for standing up for the truth." The simple message from her daughter brought tears to Amara's eyes. Through all the pain and conflict, she'd managed to teach her children the most important lesson of all, that integrity matters more than convenience, and that standing up for what's right is worth whatever cost comes with it. "What now?" Dele asked, joining her on the hotel suite's balcony. "Now we build something beautiful from what's left," Amara said, leaning into his embrace as Lego sparkled below them. "We show our children what real love looks like, what honest partnership means, what it's like when people choose each other every day instead of just when it's convenient." The domestic betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her had become the foundation for something stronger, more authentic, more valuable than what she'd lost. And as she watched the city that had shaped her into a survivor, Amara knew that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was living so well that her betrayers would spend the rest of their lives wondering what they'd thrown away. But the story wasn't quite over yet. There was still one more surprise waiting in the shadows, one final revelation that would complete her transformation from victim to victor. 6 months after the wedding that had become Lagos society's most talked about scandal, Amara stood in the boardroom of her expanded business empire, looking out over Victoria Island as she prepared for a meeting that would close the final chapter of her old life and open an entirely new one. Her 3 boutiques had grown to 5, with a flagship store in Abuja and plans for expansion to Accra. The scandal that was supposed to destroy her reputation had instead made her a symbol of female resilience and business integrity, attracting customers who admired her strength and wanted to support her success. Dele had moved permanently to Lagos, merging his practice with a prestigious local firm and establishing himself as one of the city's most sought-after corporate lawyers. Their relationship had deepened naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than the desperate need that had characterized too many of her past relationships. More importantly, Kwame and Ton were thriving. The custody modification had been granted, giving Amara full custody with supervised visitation for Kwame. Her children were learning what healthy relationships looked like, what it meant to be loved without conditions or manipulation. But today's meeting was about more than personal success. It was about justice in its most complete form. Mrs. Okonkwo, her secretary, announced over the intercom, "Your 3 o'clock appointment is here." The door opened to admit a woman Amara didn't recognize, young, professionally dressed, with the nervous energy of someone about to make a difficult confession. "Mrs. Okonkwo, thank you for seeing me. My name is Chioma Oku. I worked for Kwame's company as a financial analyst." Amara gestured to the chair across from her desk, noting the past tense. "What can I do for you, Miss Oku? I've been following your story in the news, and I have information I think you should know. About things that go beyond what came out in court." For the next hour, Chioma revealed a pattern of financial crimes that dwarfed the business fraud that had already been exposed. Kwame had been embezzling from his own company, creating fake contracts and inflated invoices to siphon money into personal accounts. Zara had been complicit, using her event planning business to launder the stolen funds through fake vendor payments and inflated service charges. "Why are you telling me this?" Amara asked when the young woman finished her devastating recital. "Because you were right. About integrity, about consequences, about how character matters more than success. I've been watching them panic as their businesses collapse, as clients abandon them, as their reputation in Lagos becomes toxic. But they are still trying to blame everyone except themselves." Chioma handed over a flash drive containing financial records, emails, and recorded conversations that documented years of systematic theft and fraud. "I copied everything before I resigned last week. The company is facing bankruptcy, and Kwame has been trying to convince employees to lie to investigators. He threatened to destroy my career if I didn't help him cover up the missing money." Amara felt the familiar cold satisfaction of seeing justice complete itself. The domestic betrayal that had started this entire saga was revealing itself to be part of a much larger pattern of deception and criminality. "Have you taken this to the authorities?" "Not yet. I wanted you to have it first. You're the reason I found the courage to stand up to him." That evening, as Amara and Dele reviewed the financial documents with forensic accountants and federal prosecutors, the scope of Kwame and Zara's crimes became clear. They had stolen millions of naira over several years, using their social connections and business reputations to facilitate increasingly elaborate fraud schemes. "This is going to prison time," the lead prosecutor said grimly. "Multiple felonies, conspiracy charges, money laundering. They are looking at decades behind bars." Amara felt no satisfaction in the prospect of their imprisonment, but she felt profound relief that their ability to harm other people was finally being eliminated. How many other businesses had they defrauded? How many other families had they destroyed with their lies and manipulations? "What happens now?" she asked. "We arrest them tomorrow morning. The evidence is overwhelming, and with Miss Oku's testimony, we have everything we need for conviction." As the prosecutors left, Dele pulled Amara into his arms, holding her close as she processed the magnitude of what was happening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I think so. It's strange, I should feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad for who they could have been, sad for the people they've hurt, sad that it had to end this way. That's what makes you different from them, Dele said. You're capable of empathy even for people who've wronged you. They never learned that skill. The arrest made front-page news across Nigeria. Photos of Kwame and Zara being led away in handcuffs appeared on every major news outlet, accompanied by detailed accounts of their fraud scheme and the trail of victims they'd left behind. The public reaction was swift and merciless. The couple who had been celebrated as legal society's golden pair were now reviled as common criminals who had used their privilege and connections to steal from people who trusted them. Mama, Tan said that evening as they watched the news coverage, "Are Daddy and Auntie Zara really going to jail?" "It looks that way, my love. They made very bad choices and hurt a lot of people. Sometimes when adults do things like that, they have to face serious consequences. Will we be okay?" Amara pulled her son closer, looking around at the beautiful home she'd built through her own hard work, at the successful business she'd created through integrity and determination, at the loving relationship she'd found with a man who valued her strength rather than trying to diminish it. "We're going to be more than okay," she said. "We are going to be happy." 1 year later, Amara stood in the same Lagos courthouse where she'd fought for justice, wearing a different kind of outfit entirely. The elegant white dress she'd chosen for her wedding to Dele was simple but stunning, a declaration of new beginnings rather than past victories. The ceremony was intimate, just close family and friends who had supported them through the difficult times. Kemi and Ton stood as her honor attendants, their faces glowing with happiness as they watched their mother marry a man who had proven his love through actions rather than words. As Dele slipped the ring onto her finger, Amara felt the last wounds from her first marriage finally heal. She'd learned that betrayal could be survived, that strength could emerge from devastation, and that the best revenge was building a life so beautiful that her enemies would spend their prison sentences regretting what they'd thrown away. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced, and as Dele's lips met hers, Amara heard the applause of people who truly loved her, who celebrated her happiness without reservation or hidden agendas. Later, at the reception at her favorite restaurant in Ikoyi, Chief Ogundemo raised his glass in a toast that brought tears to her eyes. "To Amara and Dele," he said, his voice carrying over the assembled guests, "who have shown us that integrity is not just about doing what's right when it's easy, but about maintaining your character when it's hard. May your marriage be built on the solid foundation of trust, honesty, and mutual respect." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Zanzibar, Amara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The domestic betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had become the catalyst for the most important growth of her life. She'd learned to value herself, to demand honesty from the people she loved, to protect her children without sacrificing her own happiness, and to build success through integrity rather than manipulation. Kwame and Zara were serving concurrent sentences in federal prison, their businesses dissolved, their reputations permanently destroyed. But their downfall had never been Amara's primary goal, it had simply been the natural consequence of their choices. "Ready to start our new adventure?" Dele asked as their car pulled away from the restaurant. "More than ready," Amara replied, looking back at the Lagos skyline one last time before turning toward the future. "I spent so many years trying to save something that wasn't worth saving. Now I get to build something that actually matters." As they drove through the city that had shaped her into a survivor, a successful businesswoman, and finally a woman who understood her own worth, Amara smiled at the beautiful irony of it all. She'd been shocked when her husband married her best friend, devastated by the betrayal and manipulation, broken by the public humiliation and emotional abuse. But that shock had awakened her to truth she'd been avoiding, that betrayal had revealed character she didn't know she possessed, and that brokenness had been the foundation for building something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. The woman who had begged Kwame to go to counseling was gone forever, replaced by someone who would never again settle for less than she deserved. And as her plane lifted off from Lagos Airport, carrying her toward a honeymoon with a man who celebrated her strength rather than fearing it, Amara knew that the best revenge truly was living well. The story that had begun with the most shocking betrayal of her life had become the foundation for the most beautiful chapter she'd ever written. And this time, she was both the author and the heroine of her own tale. The end. That's a wrap on She Was Shocked When Her Husband Married Her Best Friend. What did you think of Amara's incredible journey from victim to victor? Did Kwame and Zara get what they deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Kaysmart Mythic's Tales for more incredible stories of love, betrayal, and justice, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that betrayal isn't the end, it's often the beginning of something much better. And let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. Until next time, remember, your character is your destiny, and integrity is always worth fighting for. See you in the next story. Performing Art Sparkles.